Evening, everyone.
Kavod, how are you?
Oh, Hashem, thank you. Okay.
Kavod, we were left at Rashi.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we'll just review a little bit because I'm not sure where I stopped, but anyway, it says here that we don't wash our hands with wine. That's what we talked about. And says, but Yosef, it's a machloket, Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbanan. Rabbi Eliezer, these two rabbis, v'kaimalan k'Rabbanan. So we hold like the rabbis. Damre ben kach u ben kach, klamar ben chai b'mazug, right? Whether it's um, undiluted or diluted wine, still we don't wash our hands with it. The Adaim v'eskimu Rosh v'Rashba. So it says the Rosh and Rashba agreed the Divi Rabad with the opinion of the Rabad shepirish the lab netilat yadayim machshirim le'achila kamar. So we're not talking about washing the hands for the sake of eating. Because over there, nobody says you're allowed to do that. To wash with wine. The palig shena ela b'mayim. Only you can do it with water. אלא נטילת לנקות בעלמא קמרי. So therefore, it must be we're talking here about washing for cleanliness. Mishum hefsed achalin, and because of losing right, you're wasting food. So what does that mean? When you wash with wine, you're wasting. It's a waste, and that's why it's not good to do that. The funny thing is, that in those days, wine was relatively cheap. And nevertheless, right? We say don't wash with it. But nowadays it's so expensive, you have to be crazy to wash your hands with the wine. Right? That's a lot of money. Each washing will cost you about $10. So you don't want that, right? Okay. But anyway, right, let's move on. So he says, "Umash mali, dehad de'amina de'en zorkin ochalin, afilu bezorek betoch kera." That which we said, that we shouldn't throw food, uh, that even applies that into the case where he throws it into the tray, or al gabe mapa, or on a tablecloth. Shena ochalin mitlachlechim, so the food will not get dirty like that. Afilu hachi tenim, but nevertheless, right? Still, it's a problem anyway. So now he itemizes, right, this thing. He says, "Tenim shebishlu kol tzochan." If you have figs that are totally ripe, betutim and or strawberries, asur mipnei shemitoch shehen mitma'achim. Why is that? Because since they get squashed al dezikatan by throwing them because they're soft, hem masim, so they become disgusting. Bene ochalin, in the eyes of the ones who eat. ותדע דהה כי פתק מורזותה דאיסטנה לרבשי דהיינו בשר מבושל. כדמפרש רש"י על כוכך מקום נקי פתק דהה למיכל פתק לאו בקי גבנה כאמר דמידי דממיס כגון תאנים בתותים אסור לזורקם. So also over there, right, in this place, it talks about this issue about throwing things around which can get damaged food because it's very soft, it gets squashed. So it says, since he forbade to throw the bread, implies that afilu bezarko al gabe makom naki, that applies even if he throws it to a clean place, right? Even if it's clean, doesn't matter. Asar, he still forbids that. Because of the prominence of the bread, right? As we said, bread is like the most prominent food. Even though it doesn't become disgusting, because you're disgracing the bread. This is the problem, right? You're disgracing it by throwing it. That's what's in Tosod. En zorkin et hapar, it says, right? We don't throw the bread. Even if it doesn't become disgusting. Asur lizok. So there's also other food, he says, not allowed to throw it. When it comes to something which becomes disgusting. And even though Shemuel says, that a person can do his needs with the bread, in other words, to utilize it for some purpose, but that's only if it doesn't become disgusting. So we can say, right, answer that when it comes to throwing, right, it's different. To have a bizui tuba, because that's considered to be like really disgraceful. Also, throwing the bread is not really like a need, for eating it. Like for instance, tilting the right, leaning the tray on the bread. The modeh Shmuel she'en zorkin pat, that Shmuel admits that we don't throw the bread. V'chen yired dat harosh. That's also the opinion of the Rosh. Tehad de Tan Rabbanan arba devarim ne'emru bepat. That which we learned, that four things were said regarding the bread, and manichin basar chai alapat. We already discussed these, right? These four things, but he's repeating it now. He's saying, right, that one thing, as we said, is that we don't put raw meat alapat on the bread. Then ma'avirin kos. And also, we said, right, we don't pass over a cup, male alapat, it was full of wine, which is over the bread. Then samchin takera pepat, and as we said, we don't lean the tray onto the bread. Then zorkin tapat, and we don't throw bread. Katav u'Shmuel modeh bechol ma sheshaniנו b'braita. So he writes that Shmuel admits to all these things that we've learned here. Zo bar me'en samchin, except the one about leaning it on the bread, the tray, the share, which is allowed according to him. It doesn't become disgusting. Okay. ונראה לטעמה משום דכל הנה לאו צורך אכילה הן. So he says that it seems to be the reason is because there's no need for eating, these kinds of actions. You don't need it to eat. כמו שמיכת הקערה בפת, right? Like the case of the leaning the tray on the bread. That's sort of a need. Why is that a need? Because, you need something to lean it on. But according to Rashba, he says, Katab Hashem Rabbeinu, he wrote the name of Rabbeinu Hai. Seems like there's no difference between bread and other foods. That's the way it seems. From Rabbeinu Yonah. Also Rashi seems to say like that. The ahad the Tan Rabbanan mamshichinyan, because on this piece of Gemara that he said regarding the wine, וזורקים לפניהם כליות, אבל לא גלוסקאות, לא בימות החמה ולא בימות הגשמים. So Rashi says, right, we're not allowed to throw bread, even though you're allowed to throw other things, right, over there. There are certain things you can throw, but not bread. In other words, there's other food you can throw. ולא בימות הגשמים, כתב, אבל לא גלוסקאות. But he says, right, but not gluskaot, not bread. Share af bimot hachama en nimasim zigatan. Why is that? So he says because even in the summer they become disgusting when you throw them. Nireh midvarav she'im lo hayu nimasim. So it seems from his words that even if they were not disgusting, haya mutar lezorkan, it will be allowed to throw them. Papi shegluskaot paten. Even though that these loaves of bread, they're just basically bread, right? There's nothing different. V'had piresh Rashi. That which Rashi explains the loma misrimon ve'egos, that when it comes to pomegranates and hazelnuts, they don't get disgusting when you throw them. V'chol davar kasher, and anything which is hard like that. Nireh she'afilu be'en klipatan alehen. It's even talking about the case where they're not the shell is not on them; it's removed. Kamar share me'achar she'enam mima'achin. Why is that mitma'achin? Since they're not getting squashed, right? Because they're sturdy, they don't get squashed when you throw them. Al zika, kol hazorek al gabe makom naki. So even if you throw it on a place which is clean, enam nimasim, right? Not even, but if you throw it in a place which is clean, it will not become disgusting. The question is, are you allowed to throw it on the floor? Siman Siman. It'll be explained in the end of this chapter regarding if you can throw them on the floor. Okay, so that seems to be the end of this halacha in the Beit Yosef. So let's see Shulchan Aruch and summarize this, right? All this big piece of Torah here, which was Aleph. Yeah, that's like more than half the chapter. Okay, so let's see that. נושא שולחן ערוך, הקערה אם היא מלאת דבר שאם ייפול על הפת יימאס. So he says, if you have a tray, if it's full of something that if it would fall on the bread, it would get disgusting. ואין נותנין הידיים ביין. I'm sorry, I didn't start from the beginning. One more time. So it says like this: the person can do his needs with the bread. That's only if it doesn't become disgusting. So in other words, even though right we treat bread with respect, nevertheless, right, it's not like some kind of a tefillin or mezuzah, right? It's like holy. It's not a holy artifact, right? So we're not that particular with it, right? So you got to put it into perspective, right? So that's one thing. And then, right, but if it's going to become disgusting, no, so if it's going to cause it to become disgusting, you're not allowed to do that because, you're disrespecting the bread, as we said, right, which is not a good thing because it's a staple of our diet, right, the most important food. So therefore, he says we shouldn't put right raw meat on top of the bread. That's one thing. Then ma'avirin alav kos maleh. Another thing is that, as we said, right, we shouldn't pass over it a cup which is full of wine. And we don't rest the tray on it, not the rest, the lean, whatever. Yeah, same thing. When is that? When are we talking about? If it's full of something where if it'll fall on the bread, right, it'll become disgusting. So in other words, anything which can lead to disgusting, right, or disrespecting the bread, because of these things, therefore you shouldn't do it, right? That's the general rule. Right? So now we're going to the second piece, which is right that we don't wash our hands with wine, right? So and it says ben bemazuk ben bechai. It doesn't matter whether it's undiluted or diluted wine; it's all the same, right? Afilu netila, even if it's a washing, shenat tzorech achila, which is not for the sake of eating. So we said, right? What's the reason why we don't do that? Because you're wasting the wine, right? Too bad, right? Shucks, it's a waste. It's going to waste. So then he says, "Ve'en zorkin apat mishum bizayin ochalim." Another thing we mentioned is that we don't throw the bread because you're disgracing the food. So he says, "Ukishim shen zorkin et apat," just like we don't throw bread right around like that. Kach en zorkin ochalin nimasim ad yazika. Also, you shouldn't throw any food which will become disgusting by way of throwing it. Because it's not sturdy enough, right, to hold up to that. It's too right. It's too flimsy, so it'll get squashed. So then, don't do it. Right, that's the thing. But if it doesn't become disgusting, so he brings the examples, right, that we said in the Bit Yosef. What was that? Right, hazelnuts, pomegranates, right, and chavushim, right, which we said is the quinces. So all those things, right, which are hard, they don't get disgusting. So then there's no prohibition to throw it like that. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay. So we did Aleph. Now let's go to Bet. Okay. Oh, looks like there is none. So I guess just Shulchan Aruch. Let's see. Let's take a look at that. Right. So interesting. He says like this. "V'lo yeshiv adam al kupat meleat tenim." So it says, don't a person shouldn't sit on top of a box which is full of figs and dates. אבל יושב על הקופה מלאה קטנית. But he can sit on top of a box which is full of legumes, or al igul shel devela, right? Or hard, pressed cakes of figs, whatever. מפני שנהגו כן אין סומכין באוכלים, because they were accustomed to do that. באוכלים. ואין מכסין באוכלים. Okay. So in other words, what is he trying to say here? right? Apparently, what he means to say is that if you have a box full of right produce, so if the produce is hard, it can handle the weight of somebody sitting on it. So then it's allowed. But if it's something which is flimsy and soft, so there, if you sit on it, it's going to get squashed, and that's like you're damaging it really. So therefore, you're not allowed to do that. Let's see, but Yosef. Yeah, so Bet Yosef we don't have, so we'll go straight to Shulchan Aruch. That's it. So Shulchan Aruch, lo yeshiv adam al kupa belea tenim begrogrot. Right, as we said, don't sit on top of a box which is full of soft fruits. Right. So what's the example? Figs, right, and dates. Whatever. But on the other hand, right, about yoshev about igul shedabila. But you can sit on something which is hard, hard fruits, like dried fruits, or right, or if you have a box full of right legumes, which usually they're hard. So that's why we can do it. It's not a problem. Nothing. It's not going to get damaged with the weight. So let me just make sure, right? The Mishnah Berurah, we got this understanding right. Let's see what he says. Yeah, so Mishnah Berurah makes a good point over here, right? Which is that uh, we said, right, don't sit on top of the box. But he says if the box is hard, right, and because of that it can hold you up and not press down on the fruits, so then it wouldn't be a problem. He's of course he's that's clear. Yeah, so right, exactly what we said. He says here, right, that something which is hard, it's okay to sit on it. Why? Because it won't get damaged. It won't get squashed. Okay, good. That's it. So let's move on to Gimel. So now we're getting to the daisa, right, which is porridge. So what's the story with the porridge? The question is, can you eat the porridge with the bread? What's the question? In other words, you're gonna like wipe it up with the bread and eat it like that, right? You're not gonna use a fork or a spoon. You're gonna use the bread as like as your fork. Question is, can you do that? And so let's see what it says about that. Gimel. So it says here, Katav Adonai Aviyah Rosh Zal, right? Says the Rosh, the Tur says, Yesh Nuhagim Lechol Daisa Bepat, right? As we said, some people have the custom to eat porridge with bread. Let's see that inside the Tur.
What's porridge? Is that like oatmeal?
There must be another name for it, in English. It's like, you know what they call it, right? Like cream of wheat, something like that, right?
Oh, gotcha.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's like grits.
Right, grits. Yeah, exactly. Okay. The old name is porridge, right? From the good old days. Okay. Anyway, so again, right, as we said, let's read the Torah. It's the stuff that they give to the kids, the babies, the kids like it. It makes them nice and strong, right? The kids, builds their strength. Okay. So, yeah, so it says, oh, beautiful. Yeah. Okay. So, right, so it starts like this. Um, keeps on going back more and more. One second. Right, so let's start from all the way from the top. It says like this: "En somchin be'ochalin ve'en mechasin be'ochalin." So it says two things you shouldn't do is um, to cover with foods, using foods as a cover or as a place to lean on, right? Ve'en ochalin be'ochalin, and also don't eat food by way of food. In other words, using it as a fork, right? Like something like that. Unless it's fit to eat. Perush elu im elu. In other words, they're free to eat together, one with the other. Ve'ochalan b'yachad, eats them together. So he says, according to this, it will be forbidden to eat the porridge, right, with the bread, because they're usually not eaten together, because porridge, is bread itself, right? That's what it is. So why would you want to eat that with bread? מקום כ' ואפשר דהי מסכת סופרים פליגה דשמואל. So תקתנה אין סומכין ואין מכסין באוכלין ושמואל שרה. According to Shmuel, apparently it's allowed to do this, right? תהה לא ממיס, because that becomes disgusting. ואנן קיים עלן כשמואל. So it says we hold like Shmuel ולא ממיס הפת שאוכל בדייסה. So when you eat bread, right, with the porridge, it doesn't become disgusting. ואני ראיתי גדולים שהיו אוכלים בכל פעם me'at min pat, says they would eat. I said I saw big people who used to eat together with the bread, right? The ima daisa with the porridge. Adkan. Okay, so okay, whatever. So let's see, but Yosef. Still more to here we didn't read. Something is being here, something here. Let's see if there's something before that. Yeah, this piece, okay. So it says another piece, right, in the tour. It says, Katada b'nei Yarso. The Rosh Sa writes, Yesh noagim lechol daisa bepat. Some, right, are accustomed to eat porridge with bread. Makom kaf, instead of using a fork, right? Kivan she'ochalina pat achakach, because they eat the bread afterwards. Umasechet Sofrim kasinan en noagim bezuya be'ochalin. But it says in Masechet Sofrim that we shouldn't disgrace the food. Don't throw food from place to place. And you shouldn't sit on a box. Okay, now we got it. More or less, we got the idea. So let's go back there. So regarding this, says Bet Yosef, this Tshuva of the Rosh, right? It's over there in this in the Gemara. All right, that's not really a tshuva, right? It's on a Talmud. Anyway, v'kachem sham divrei Tosfot. That's the way Tosfot says. V'chen katu agaot maimoniyot. And also this rabbi, Perek Zayin Minchot Brachot, right? This place, Laws of Brachot, chapter 7, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes on, Ela im ken unless they're fitting to eat together, these two foods. Perush Elohim Elo. So he says, explains, right? That means one with the other. The Ochalan Biachar eats them together. Right? Yeah, so, what's a classic example? In Israel, like everybody eats bread with hummus, so they eat that together, they dip the bread in the hummus and they eat it together. Or the tahina, whatever it is, right? All that stuff that they like to eat in Israel. So that's what we're talking about, right? And then that's obviously it's no problem to do that because it's meant to be eaten like that, so there's nothing, wrong with that. And then he says, כתב שם הראש, says the ראש, שאין לפרש היו ראויים דקאמר לאפוקי שאינם ראויים לאכילה, דכל שכן אם אינם ראויים לאכילה. But the Rosh says even or the more so if they're not fitting to eat together, then מותר להשתמש בהם, you're allowed to use them, כשישתמש במעשה עץ. When he uses, right, something from wood, shimesh ilkach al kochach masa et shimesh ilkach, right? So al kochach rawin la'achila. So he says, therefore they're fitting to eat. The kamar hainu. So when he said they're fitting to eat, she'ochalin biyachad, they're eating together. Ubagot maimoniot, right? In this place it says katuv b'shem masechet sofrim. It says the name of sofrim. Rashbag Omer, right? The Rashbag says en ochalin be'ochalin. Don't eat food with food, unless they're meant to be eaten together. Arosh, I'm sorry. So that comes out like the Rosh. So it says, it seems to me that those who eat, bread and daisa, right, the porridge together, they hold like Shmuel. So that which they eat the bread afterwards, So he says that's because when you eat it together with the porridge, it doesn't become disgusting. So it says since he eats it afterwards, so you're not losing any food, right? You're not wasting the food because you will eventually eat the bread too. But if, right, he would not eat it, then nobody else will. So therefore, after he put this in his mouth, so therefore, he did, waste the food here by that. ובמסכת סופרים נראה שאף על פי שאוכלנו ואחר כך אסור מפני. So it says, right, but in Sofrim it says, even if you're going to eat it afterwards, it's still forbidden, מפני שהוא זלזול הפת, because you're disgracing the bread like that. שמשמש במעשה עץ בעלמא, משום אחי אסר לאכול אוכלין באוכלין. So you're disgracing it by using it as a fork, basically, right? And that's why they told us, the sages, don't eat food with food, right? Meaning what? To use one food to eat the other food. Using it as a fork, right? Or a spoon, whatever it is. Okay. אלא אם כן אוכלן בבת אחד, unless he eats them together. In other words, they're eaten together like that. Because then it doesn't look like the bread is becoming, to serve, to be subsidiary to the daisa, to the porridge. Rather, it's the other way around, right? The porridge is going to be subsidiary to the bread. Because he's taking it, right? He's using it to use it as a relish or at a pot with the bread. והגדולים שהיו אוכלים בפת פעם מעט מן הפת עם הדייסה. So he says the big people who used to eat every time, right? Some of the bread with the daisa, with the porridge. So he says it looks like they were doing like it says over there in Sofrim. So therefore they would eat every time, right? A little bit of the bread as well. Ima daisa with the porridge. Because then it looks like that the daisa is coming, right? The porridge is coming to accompany the bread. And even though they were not eating, right, every time, only just a little bit of the bread. Nevertheless, it's enough, just the fact that they were eating something. In order to show you, right, to display that it's not the bread which is subsidiary to the porridge, it's just the other way around. So he says, even according to these big rabbis, it seems like he would have to eat, right, that whole piece that he used to eat the porridge with. Because otherwise, whatever would remain from it, since he put it inside his mouth, he wouldn't be fitting to eat by anybody else. He's the only one who would eat that. Nobody else would eat it, since it was already in his mouth. So therefore, you'd be causing, right, wasting food there by doing that. Okay, so that's the end of it. So I guess we'll do Shulchan Aruch, and we can stop there maybe. Let's see. So it says Shulchan Aruch like this. Mutar lechol daisa, right? As we said, you're allowed to eat, right? Daisa. So here he defines what it is, right? Exactly, whatever. So he says, what is daisa? It's wheat, right? Niklefet mevushelet. It's wheat which is cooked, right? Basically, cooked wheat. That's what it is. Okay, but it's not. The husks are removed, right? So it's not whole wheat. So that's what we're talking about. The pot. So you're allowed to eat that together, right, with the bread. So what does that mean? What is it telling you? What it's telling you is that you can use the bread as a fork to eat your daisa, right? No problem with that. Makom kaf, right? But he says that's only if what? If you're going to eat that bread afterwards, right? Otherwise, if you're not going to eat it, nobody else will, because it was in your mouth. So therefore, it's going to go to waste, and that you shouldn't do. So therefore, the condition is, you want to use the bread as a fork, okay, but you better eat that bread afterwards. Otherwise, it's going to get left over and go to waste. Nobody's going to want to touch it anymore. המדקדקים אוכלים בכל פעם שמכניסים לתוך פיהם מעט מן הפת עם הדייסה. So he says, but the ones who are particular about this halacha, so what do? Every time, they put some of the porridge, right, inside their mouth, a little bread also goes inside. So what's the purpose of that? So if I remember correctly, in the Beit Yosef, we said the purpose is that to display, that that bread will not go to waste. You are eating together. It says the Rama, "V'anishar min apat achar kach ochalin oto," right? And the Rama says, right, as we mentioned already, that whatever's left over from the bread, you should eat that because, as we said, right, otherwise nobody will touch it. So let me just look at the Mishnah Berurah here. Let's see if he has anything interesting to say. So. Right. So as we said in the Beit Yosef, right, Mishnah Berurah says the same thing, that the reason why when we want to, the people who are particular, they eat a little bread together with the daisa, is because this way it shows that the main food here is the bread, right, and not the daisa, because you're eating it. So therefore, it's the daisa which is coming as a relish for the bread, right? And that's the way it should be. The bread should be more prominent than the daisa. Okay, great. So I guess we'll stop here. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Bezat Hashem, Shabbat Shalom, Laila Tov, Chazak Baruch. We'll see you next week, Sunday, Bezat Hashem. A fresh new start, and we will continue. God bless.
Well, thank you so much.
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.